It seems like no matter where you go, you are constantly being inundated with AI art. It really just seems like you cannot go anywhere without encountering some sort of AI generated image. While admittedly, some of it can pass as being relatively good, the vast majority of it is just actual garbage. I mean, AI art is just literally everywhere. I was in Hobby Lobby the other day and I was just looking at the wall decorations, and literally like 50% of it was just AI generated nonsense. I was baffled. Don't even get me started on like all of the advertisements that you'll get on YouTube or even just like on Google ads. It's really disheartening to see these ads. We can't even forget the Coca-Cola ads that they did, right, using AI. And this even extends to image inspiration boards like Pinterest. If you go on Pinterest, it is incredibly hard to find stuff that is made by actual human beings. There is just so much AI generated nonsense. And a bunch of ads. Sometimes AI generated ads. Even on YouTube, I've come across these strange videos that talk about like the history of a company or the history of a product, and it just gets so much information wrong because it's generated by an AI.
They can gather every donut in the proper line until they are taken by the transferring belts, where a lot of dopamine agents are awaiting. Dopamine are happy hormones, and researchers have shown that by eating chocolate donuts, our body releases these hormones.
With all of this influx of artificially generated nonsense, it reminds me a bit, funnily enough, about the Colonel's speech from Metal Gear Solid 2 towards the end of that game, about how we are just going to, in the future, be constantly bombarded with tons of trivial junk.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
That's kind of what is happening here. And if you haven't heard of Metal Gear Solid 2, this game came out in 2001, okay? And it predicted the rise of social media and artificial intelligence and pretty much just like the internet as we know it 20 years later. It's actually insane. Wait, so it just occurred to me that maybe not a lot of you guys are familiar with the lore of Metal Gear Solid. So I'm just going to give a quick recap of just the entire lore of the series, just so you can have some background information. First off, it starts with this guy. His name is John. He's a secret agent, but he is going by the name of Naked Snake. And he's tasked by... And then get this, he takes on the moniker of Big Boss because he killed. Then he's in a coma for 5 years, but actually it's not him. It's actually a doppelganger. Fast forward just a little bit, the Big Boss has 3 clones of himself. So Raiden gets kidnapped by the Patriots and turned into a cyborg ninja. And then Solid Snake and Big Boss, they reunite at a graveyard after Raiden and Senator Armstrong, they hug it out, but Raiden's lying, and he says, "No, don't do that." And then he slices him in half with a sword. And then there's probably a little bit. And that brings us to our topic today of what do you do in a world where AI art is starting to become more and more prevalent. You see, the AI that we know today is what's known as generative AI, meaning that it is an algorithm that takes in a bunch of data sets, in this case, images, other artwork, etc., and it converts it. You'd put in a text prompt and it shoots out just an average of all of those things that it's taken in. Yes, you can argue that with enough time, artificial intelligence, generative AI will get better, but there are still a lot of things that artificial intelligence cannot replicate. And that brings me to the role of the artist, the human artist, in a world where artificial intelligence is being thrown at us, billions and billions of images at a time. So I'm going to take a little bit of an optimistic approach. I'm going to argue that human-made work will gain more and more value as time passes. As we discussed earlier, AI doesn't really make art so much as it takes in a data set, you put in a prompt, and it spits out an average. So it's not really making it, it's just making a really, really good guess on what it is that text prompt is asking for. And a lot of these data sets have very dubious ethical grounds. A lot of these images that are being used to train these AI models are just flat out stolen. There is just no permission from the artists that are being stolen from, and so whenever you're generating any of these images, you're essentially stealing somebody else's art, and that's a whole other issue. But that's the thing with AI, because it's all trained on datasets, it's going to make a lot of mistakes. But these mistakes aren't necessarily irrational in their foundation. They're completely rational because you are dealing with computers. You're dealing with ones and zeros. Humans, on the other hand, whenever they are making art, they have a lot of irrational thought that goes into it. You might make a decision in a piece of art to add something in your composition just because you feel like it at the time. That's not necessarily how a computer works. Because of that, when it comes to AI, there is no data set that can mimic the irrational human mind. So when it comes to the art that you're making, just relish in the fact that you aren't working in a world of averages and data sets, because you are your own unique person. You see, a lot of art, while it may be praised for its pure aesthetic beauty, that's certainly a thing that we look for in the art that we consume, there is also a valuation of the process, the work that made that piece of artwork. And that doesn't stop at just the physical making of that artwork. It extends back to the birth of the artist. In each piece of art that a human makes, there are years and years and years of lived experiences that go into that. That's something a computer cannot replicate. And that is something that is incredibly hopeful when it comes to moving into the future, where this overtaking of AI is just becoming just more of a daily part of our lives, is that as humans, we have the ability to extrude intention into our artworks. And I don't know about you guys, but that is incredibly hopeful. So no matter how good AI gets, it will never be able to replicate lived experiences, nuance, intentionality, or just the irrational human thoughts. I think as we move into the future, the desire to have human-made art will become even more strong. I mean, just look at something like vinyl records versus digital stream downloads, right? I mean, we all use some sort of app to stream music, but there's still an incredibly wide market for physical vinyls. That's because as humans, we love to have that collection aspect, to know that something is real, something that we can hold in our hands. With that being said, I think that you should not be discouraged as an artist. You should accept that technology is going to move forward. This rise in AI is not going to stop anytime soon, but don't let that discourage you. You have the ability to do amazing, wonderful things, and you will never be boiled down to an algorithm because you are you. And that's the approach that I'm going to be taking moving into the future.